Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever paused to think about what exactly makes your favorite nonstick pan so remarkably, well, nonstick? Or maybe why that rain jacket keeps you perfectly dry even in a real downpour. It turns out the secret often lies in this powerful yet increasingly controversial class of chemicals. We're talking about perenno and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Thankfully, they're better known by their much more memorable name, PFAS, the forever chemicals.
Mhm.
Our mission in this deep dive is really to pull back the curtain on these pervasive compounds. We want to break down what they actually are, trace their journey into our lives, explore why they're raising such serious concerns, and maybe most importantly, equip you with some actionable knowledge on how to navigate this, well, frankly, complex issue. We synthesized a wealth of information from environmental groups, cutting edge academic research, government reports to bring you the critical insights. And joining me today to help us connect these dots and make sense of the science is our resident expert.
Hi there. Yeah, it's a topic that truly touches almost every aspect of modern life, often, without us even realizing it. The sheer scale of their presence, that's what's truly eye-opening, I think.
That's a powerful point. And that name, Forever Chemicals, it really grabs your attention, doesn't it? But what does that truly mean, chemically speaking? What makes them so, well, forever?
Right. What's fascinating here is that the name Forever Chemicals isn't just some catchy phrase. It perfectly encapsulates their defining characteristic. PFAS refers to this vast family of human-made fluorinated chemicals. Now, depending on the source you consult, this family could include anywhere from about, say, 9,000 up to maybe nearly 15,000 different types of compounds.
15,000.
Yeah, it's a huge group. And their fundamental structure involves a backbone of carbon atoms. And crucially, these carbon atoms are bonded to fluorine atoms at most or sometimes all available sites. It's those incredibly strong carbon-fluorine bonds that are the key. Think of it like an unbreakable handshake at the atomic level.
Oh,
These are genuinely among the most persistent chemicals ever created because that bond is just so stable. It's incredibly strong. They simply don't readily degrade in the environment, not easily anyway.
so they just stick around.
Exactly. We're talking about a breakdown timeline that can stretch for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. This extreme stability is precisely what gives them their useful properties. The remarkable resistance to heat, oil, water makes them excellent stain repellents, grease-resistant agents. Very effective.
Which is why we use them in the first place.
Precisely. But the profound downside is that even if we were to stop using all of them, like right now, tomorrow, the problem of their persistence in our environment would continue for an astonishingly long time.
So it's that specific, super strong carbon-fluorine bond that makes them resistant to pretty much everything, which is why they were useful, but also why they just stick around indefinitely. And these aren't some recent invention, right? When did they actually start making their way into our everyday lives? And when did we, as a society, start to realize this persistence might actually be a massive problem?
That's a critical part of understanding the scope here. PFAS chemicals, they began to be manufactured and widely incorporated into products way back. We're talking the 1940s and 1950s.
The 50s, really?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And what's truly concerning, based on internal documents and historical records that have come out, is that major chemical manufacturers, names like DuPont and 3M, reportedly had knowledge of significant health risks, things like liver damage, even fatalities in animal studies, potentially as early as the 1970s.
70s, and public awareness only came much later.
Much later. Public and regulatory awareness lagged significantly behind that. It wasn't really until the late 1990s, early 2000s that the EPA was first alerted to the widespread presence of PFAS in the human body.
Wow.
And this timeline reveals what's often referred to as the whack-a-mole problem in chemical regulation.
Whack-a-mole, how so?
Well, historically, when one particular PFAS compound, like, say, PFOA or PFOS, was finally phased out due to documented health impacts and its persistence, it was often just replaced by another slightly different, newer PFAS compound.
Ah, okay, so they just swapped one for another.
Exactly. So a product might proudly declare itself PFAS-free, but that doesn't mean it's PFAS-free. It might contain a different, perhaps less studied, PFAS chemical. This cycle of regrettable substitution, it isn't just an anecdotal challenge. It's kind of a fundamental flaw in how we've often approached chemical regulation. It shows how industries can, effectively sidestep bans by simply tweaking a molecule, leaving regulators perpetually playing catch-up.
That whack-a-mole problem sounds incredibly frustrating on a regulatory level. You solve one issue, another pops up. But what does this constant presence and the substitution game actually mean for our bodies? What happens when these forever chemicals actually get into us? What are the health implications scientists are uncovering?
Yeah, and here's the truly sobering insight, I think. These forever chemicals aren't just out there somewhere. They're in us. Recent studies, like from the CDC, reveal that something like 97% to 99% of Americans carry PFAS in their bodies.
99%. That's almost everyone.
Almost everyone. This isn't a problem for some. It's a quiet, pervasive chemical presence in nearly every single one of us. Avoidance at a population level is practically impossible. They've been universally detected in humans, fish, wildlife, and in public and private water systems in every single U.S. state.
Every state. Okay, so what happens once they're inside us?
Well, once they're in us, the potential health effects are certainly concerning, as detailed by sources like the CDC, the EPA, and numerous scientific studies. Exposure has been linked to things like increased cholesterol levels, changes in liver enzymes, even small decreases in infant birth weights. For children, there's a potential connection to decreased vaccine response, which is particularly worrisome.
Decreased vaccine response. That's serious.
It is. And in pregnant women, there's data suggesting an increased risk of high blood pressure or preeclampsia. More seriously, long-term PFAS exposure has been associated with an increased risk of kidney or testicular cancer in some studies.
Cancer risks, too.
Yes. And they're also known as endocrine disruptors.
Meaning they mess with hormones.
Exactly. They can interfere with your body's hormone system, which controls basically everything: growth, metabolism, mood, reproduction. This interference can impact our reproductive, immune, endocrine, and nervous systems, and potentially lead to developmental problems in children.
So they're literally messing with our basic bodily functions at a fundamental level. Yeah, that's profound.
It is. And this brings us to how they cause harm. Unlike many other substances, PFAS don't just pass through our system quickly. They bioaccumulate.
Bioaccumulate, meaning they build up.
Right. They're absorbed by the body faster than they can be eliminated, building up in our tissues over time. And they also concentrate up the food chain. They have incredibly long half-lives in the body. For some types, it can be about 4 years before even half of the chemical is gone.
4 years for half to leave.
Correct. Which allows them to continuously accumulate with ongoing exposure. They can also mimic natural bodily functions. For example, some can act like certain fatty acids, phospholipids that your body naturally uses. This mimicry can sort of trick your system, triggering all sorts of unwanted biological responses. And some of these chemicals are even able to cross the blood-brain barrier and the placental barrier, potentially impacting developing fetuses and maybe even brain function.
Oh, wow, the placenta too.
Yes. And the truly alarming part is that PFAS are known to be toxic at incredibly low levels. For instance, some proposed drinking water limits are set at just 4 parts per trillion by the EPA. That's essentially near zero. It's a testament to their potency.
4 parts per trillion. It's hard to even conceptualize how small that is. So it sounds like these chemicals are truly everywhere, affecting us at fundamental levels, even at these infinitesimal concentrations. Given that, where are the biggest culprits? How are we most likely to encounter them in our daily lives, maybe without even realizing it?
You're right, they are incredibly widespread, embedded in so many everyday items we just take for granted. Starting with consumer products, non-stick cookware, famously like Teflon, or items made with PTFE. That's a major source for many. Heating these pans at high temperatures, especially if they're scratched or worn, can release fumes. Fumes potent enough to cause flu-like symptoms in people, sometimes called Teflon flu, and they can even be lethal to pet birds.
Right, I've heard about that. And you mentioned the labels.
Yes, always remember, PFOA-free does not mean PFAS-free. It's a crucial distinction.
Okay. What else besides pans?
Food packaging is another massive pathway. Think about that microwave popcorn bag liner.
Ah.
The inside of a pizza box, some candy wrappers, and especially those grease-resistant fast food containers. For burgers, fries, pastries, those wrappers. Studies have found PFAS in almost half of tested wrappers or pastry bags in some surveys.
Half? That's a lot of takeout containers.
It is. Then we have textiles. Stain-resistant carpets and furniture treated with things like Scotchgard. Waterproof clothing, think Gore-Tex and similar membranes. Various outdoor gear that boasts water or stain repellency.
So jackets, tents, backpacks maybe?
Potentially, yes. Anything designed to repel water or stains is suspect unless stated otherwise. Even a personal care routine isn't immune. PFAS can be found in a surprising array of products, from shampoos, sunscreens, lotions, mascaras, even certain eye drops.
Eye drops, seriously?
Shockingly, yes. And some dental flosses. Specific brands like CVS Health Ease Between, Oral-B Glide, Crest Glide, Safeway Signature Care, Colgate Total. Some of those have been found to contain PFAS coatings to make them slide better between teeth.
Dental floss.
Wait.
Wow. Okay, what else? This list is getting long.
It is. Other common items could include certain varnishes, household cleaning products, refrigerants like Freon or HFC 134A, artificial turf, some building materials, industrial lubricants, and even those keyboard air dusters sometimes contain PFAS-related compounds.
When you list them all out like that, from our pans to our dental floss, our couches, our raincoats, it truly makes you look at your kitchen cupboard or your bathroom counter quite differently, doesn't it? For the listener, it almost feels, well, overwhelming. How do we even begin to tackle something that's embedded in so many everyday items?
It can certainly feel that way. And beyond those consumer products, we also have significant environmental sources to consider. Drinking water is perhaps the most common and widely studied exposure route for many people.
Right, you mentioned water systems earlier. How does it get there?
PFAS enters water from several places. Manufacturing discharge is one, from the widespread use of certain firefighting foams, known as AFFF, especially at places like airports and military bases where fire training occurs. Runoff from landfills containing PFAS-treated products. Even atmospheric deposition, these chemicals can travel through the air and settle out. A recent U.S. Geological Survey study found them in about 45% of the sampled drinking water across the country.
Nearly half the tap water tested.
Yes. And soil can become contaminated through manufacturing, product use, disposal, and yes, they're in the air too. From factory emissions, evaporated water, and even indoor dust, which we can inhale.
Indoor dust.
From shedding off carpets, furniture, clothing. And finally, because of that bioaccumulation we discussed, these chemicals make their way up the food chain. They're found in fish and shellfish like shrimp and crabs, becoming part of our diet that way too.
That's quite a list, covering products, water, soil, air, food. It really drives home how ubiquitous these chemicals are. So for us, the listener, given how incredibly widespread they are, what can you actually do in your daily life to limit your exposure? Are there practical, actionable steps?
The good news is, yes, absolutely. Despite their ubiquity, there are concrete steps you can take to significantly reduce your personal exposure. For cookware, the best advice really is to ditch traditional non-stick options entirely if you can.
Just get rid of them.
If possible, yes. Opt instead for safer alternatives like stainless steel, cast iron, or high-quality ceramic. If you absolutely must use non-stick, be really careful with heat. Reduce it drastically, never above, say, 400 degrees Celsius or 200 degrees Celsius. Avoid preheating an empty pan, and certainly don't scrape the surface with metal utensils. That damages the coating.
Okay, so cookware is one area. What about food?
Right, food and packaging. Pop your own popcorn on the stove or in an air popper instead of using microwave bags, which are often lined with PFAS. For takeout, try to bring your own reusable metal or glass containers whenever possible.
Like bringing your own Tupperware.
Exactly. Try to limit foods that come in those grease-resistant paper wrappers or boxes. They're prime suspects. And of course, choose fresh, unpackaged foods whenever you can. Wash fruits and vegetables thoroughly, though washing won't remove PFAS in the food itself, only surface contamination.
Got it. What about around the house? Personal care?
For personal care and home products, be diligent. Specifically, reject dental floss that's PFAS coated. Actively look for PFAS-free labels on floss. Get into the habit of reading ingredient lists on cosmetics, varnishes, cleaning products. Avoid anything with perfluoro, polyfluoro, or PTFE in the name. When buying carpets or furniture, steer clear of stain-resistant coatings like Scotchgard if you can.
So just accept stains might happen.
Or choose naturally more stain-resistant fabrics like polyester or other synthetics, or simply opt for darker colors that hide stains better. And regular vacuuming, especially with a HEPA filter, is surprisingly effective at reducing PFAS levels in household dust. These chemicals can settle on surfaces and get kicked up.
Okay, vacuuming helps. What about clothes? Outdoor gear?
Similar advice. Ask for untreated carpets if possible. Avoid stain-resistant apparel or sports gear, including products with Gore-Tex coatings, unless you specifically need that high performance and accept the trade-off. Many brands are now offering PFAS-free or PFC-free alternatives, so actively look for those labels. Consumer demand drives change.
Right. And water. You mentioned filtration.
Yes, water filtration is key, given how prevalent PFAS is in drinking water in many areas. Consider using water filters specifically certified to remove PFAS compounds. Reverse osmosis systems are generally the most effective at this.
Reverse osmosis, okay.
But other common filters, like activated carbon filters found in pitchers like Brita, can also remove some PFA, particularly the longer chain ones, though maybe not as completely as RO. Check the filters certification. And remember, bottled water isn't necessarily a safer bet. It's less regulated for PFAS than tap water in some ways, and some studies have found high levels in certain brands.
So check your local water report.
Definitely. Check your water utility's annual quality report. They often have to publish it. Or use online resources like the Environmental Working Groups, the EWGs, Tap Water Map. You can look up your zip code. And for indoor air, as I mentioned, HEPA filters in your vacuum or air purifier can help capture fine particles and dust that might carry PFAS.
That's a lot of practical advice for individual action. It sounds like a real shift in consumer mindset is needed, reading labels, asking questions, maybe choosing different materials. But these chemicals are so persistent, as we've established. They're already so widely distributed in the environment. So personal choices are important, definitely. But what about the chemicals already out there? Can we actually remove PFAS from the environment or even from our bodies once they've built up over years?
That is precisely the core challenge, and it's immense. PFAS are often described accurately, I think, as virtually indestructible in the environment. Removing them, especially from vast areas like our oceans or large contaminated groundwater plumes, is considered extremely challenging. Some would even say impossible in certain contexts due to the sheer scale and the stability of the chemicals themselves.
Impossible. That's a strong word.
It reflects the difficulty. Now, water treatment plants can reduce PFAS levels. They use processes like granular activated carbon filtration, ion exchange resins, or reverse osmosis. They might also blend contaminated water with cleaner sources. But achieving complete removal from highly contaminated sources is incredibly difficult, energy-intensive, and expensive. Disposal of the contaminated filter material is another problem. This is an area where urgent research into new, more efficient, and scalable removal methods is absolutely critical. There's a lot of work happening, but no easy fixes yet.
Okay, so environmental cleanup is tough. What about getting them out of us? A detox?
Yeah, as for removing them from our bodies, it's not straightforward like that. While PFAS do have those long half-lives, meaning they persist for years, they are not easily removed through, say, a simple medical intervention or some kind of quick detox diet. That's not really how it works for these chemicals.
Right.
The primary and most effective strategy for personal health is really to minimize ongoing exposure as much as possible, prevent further accumulation. Your body will slowly excrete them over time, but that process can take years, even decades for some compounds, depending on the specific PFAS and individual factors.
So prevention is really the best medicine here.
Absolutely. Minimize what's coming in. Looking at the bigger picture, the regulatory landscape is shifting, albeit maybe slowly for some. The EPA in the U.S. is actively proposing enforceable national drinking water standards for a handful of the most common PFAS, which is a big step. And some U.S. states are actually moving faster, taking the lead by banning PFAS in certain product categories like food packaging or textiles or firefighting foam.
So some states are ahead of federal action.
Often, yes. And globally, international agreements like the Stockholm Convention have already restricted or are moving to eliminate some specific PFAS compounds. PFOAA, PFHSS have been listed. In Europe, efforts like the EU's Chemical Regulation Framework, called REACH, and this big proposal called the Universal PFAS Restriction Dossier, or UP-PFAS, they're proposing really broad bans on the manufacturing, import, and use of thousands of PFAS chemicals across the continent. That could be huge if enacted.
A broad ban. So is the key then maybe shifting from targeting individual chemicals like PFOA to regulating the entire class of PFAS?
Precisely. That's the argument many scientists and non-governmental organizations are making very strongly now, advocating for what's called class-based regulation, treating all PFAS, or at least large subgroups, as a single class for regulatory purposes. This is seen as essential to truly avoid that whack-a-mole problem we discussed, where one harmful chemical is simply replaced by a slightly different, potentially equally harmful relative.
Stop the substitutions.
Exactly. There's also increasing pressure on industry through regulations, but also consumer demand and investor pressure to take responsibility, to not only phase out existing PFAS, but to actively invest in and develop safer, genuinely non-toxic alternatives. Transparency is key too. Ultimately, supporting environmental organizations pushing for change and advocating to lawmakers for stronger, more comprehensive regulations, that's really key to achieving larger-scale reduction and protecting public health for the long term. Individual action matters, but systemic change is crucial.
So what does this all mean? It's clear the world of forever chemicals is undoubtedly complex. It feels incredibly pervasive. But hopefully understanding it, as we've tried to do in this deep dive, is that first crucial step towards a healthier future for you and, well, for the planet.
Absolutely. And that understanding, I think, leads us to a broader, perhaps even more profound question for everyone listening. If our drive for convenience and high performance in products continues without fully considering the long-term chemical footprint, the unintended consequences, what other forever challenges are we inadvertently, baking into the future for generations to come? Your daily choices, the products you buy, the questions you ask, combined with advocating for stronger regulation and corporate accountability, that truly holds the power to shape that future. But we really encourage you to explore more on your own, maybe look up some of the organizations we mentioned, check out the EWG guide, and definitely start looking closely at those product labels. Knowledge is power here.